Do you paint a study of your work before you get started on a larger panel? I'm Pat from Scribner Art and Design, and today I'm in my studio, and that is just what I'm going to be doing. I had a request from one of my galleries in Invermere, BC, in the interior, Art on 9th. They have asked their artists if they would like to interpret a local scene. 14 of us have decided to go for it, and we will all be painting from the same image, and there will be 14 different paintings, interpretations of this particular scene. I don't normally work from photos, so I've decided to take the photo and do a study before I commit to my larger canvas. So let's get started. This is the photograph that we've been given to make a painting of, and there's 14 artists going to interpret this photograph. I'm not interested in painting it as is or square, so I'm going to crop it, and the final canvas I'm going to be painting on is 16 by 40, so I have measured this out to be equivalent or close. It is 8 by 20, less the tape on the top and the bottom of the canvas. So this is the painting. I have it in my photo app on my iPad, and I'm going to crop it. So again, this might not be accurate because I can't put in the exact measurements like I could on Photoshop, but it's going to give me an idea. So I can scooch this app around to see where I want to paint, and there's many opportunities. That side's not so good, but I could crop this part and have those tall trees. But I kind of like the simplicity of this. The horizon line is a little high, so I will change that, but that's what I'm going to commit to. So some sky, some mountains, a band of trees. I may leave out this portion of it, but I am really interested in the textures down here and the kind of lines and stuff of this, I guess it's a bush. So that's how I'm going to interpret it, as a tall vertical. So I've used a canvas sheet, and I'm taped it off around the edges with white artist tape, just so I do have a clean border. I've let the tape overlap onto my board so that it stays up there nice, and I'm going to get started by doing a drawing based on the photo, loosely speaking. That'll just be my guidance, and then I will tone the canvas and proceed with the painting. So I'm going to loosely sketch it in just with a pencil at first, and I want to move my horizon line down or up, depending if I want more texture and less sky, or more sky and less foreground. So, which way to go? So I've decided to include the mountain in the background because this painting is going to a resort mountain town, and I think that will be appropriate to keep the mountain. So I'm going to make the foreground a little less, so it's not half. So just establish that line. And then, like I said, I'm probably going to skip some of the trees in the center, but I might put that differentiation in color in. And now I have a tree line. And then I have the mountain, a portion of the mountain. And then the rest of this is sky and cloud. So nothing too important there. And you know, I'm not going to worry really about drawing in a lot of this other stuff with my pencil. That's just going to show up later. So establishing my composition, I want to make sure that I don't end up with that horizon line, which is here, right smack dab in the middle of my canvas. So I've got about a third going on, and so that's good. That's going to be a better composition than half and half. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in with color lines so that you can see it better, and then tone the background. That was burnt sienna. Now I'm going to tone it with the quinacridone nickel azo gold on the background. I'm going to use a foam brush, putting some water on it first. Just a thin layer here. Yeah, this canvas paper is definitely very weird. It's like it doesn't have enough gesso on it and it's resisting the paint. It's just something I pulled out of my drawer. That's been sitting there. I don't really know what it was. It's just one sheet and it's a bit odd to paint on. I'm sorry, my canvas is jiggling as well. Okay, so just going to leave that like that. My color palette is Pyrrole Red, Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue, Transparent Yellow Oxide, Cerulean Blue, Ultramarine Blue, and some burnt umber. So I'm going to block in the sky. That's the cerulean. Next I'm going to do the mountains. I'm going to do this in the ultramarine blue. I'm going to blend a bit of the two together. Make some yellow and blue to make some green. And put in this tree area. I'm working on the foreground now, building up another layer of transparent paint. I'm using the nickel azo gold, just a little bit thicker. Establishing the darker area where the bush is. So I'm changing the composition on the bottom here somewhat because mine is a little bit less than the actual photograph. I like using the back end of my brush as well, just to scratch some lines and marks in. So in this case, indicating a little bit of the tree structure. Putting a little bit of dark back into the mountain area. So I've mixed some lighter paint with titanium white and ultramarine blue just to put in the shape of my cloud. I'm not trying to actually paint the whole cloud, but just establish where it's going to live. You want to be mindful of your corners, that you don't end up with your corners being the same. So if you look at the photo reference, the white cloud has gone up on both sides because I cropped it. So I'm leaving part of that out on the left-hand side. I'm going to leave more blue in there. Starting to add some lighter tones on top of the dark here in the mountain. So there's a lot of snow-covered trees when you look at it close up. So just trying to capture a little bit of the essence of that. I'm holding my brush on the side and kind of scumbling that paint across. So I mixed up a little bit more of a bluish green color. I added a little yellow to my mix. It's important to modulate your colors so your paintings don't look flat. Put a little bit more red in this color now. So having some cool and some warm happening on that mountain range. Working a little bit of that tone into the clouds as well. Coming back into the tree line, making them darker. My value on the first go round is way too light. I am going to bring some of those trees into the foreground. These ones are just dead trees, no foliage on them. Adding some of the dark color throughout the foreground. And adding some white highlights. Adding a little bit of bluey green down into the forefront as well, and into the tree area. So integrating the colors throughout your painting is really important. Working on the whole painting at one time, opposed to working from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top, but working all throughout your painting. I'm using a knitting needle here just to try and scratch into the paint and move some of it around. I like to use knitting needles or bamboo skewers, both work well. Here I have a bamboo skewer and I'm adding some white paint with it to indicate those dead trees. I find if I use a paintbrush for these small details that I tend to become very painterly, and that's not what I want to indicate. I want this to be really loose and just give you an impression of what it is. So I do like scratching and scratching paint on with alternative tools. So I encourage you to try different things. It makes for an interesting painting rather than just using a brush throughout. So again, coming back into the foreground, adding a little bit more highlights. So I've decided to go back in and lighten this area. It's a bit dark and I need to push it back. I like to hold my brush on the end as well to stay as loose as possible, so I don't end up really painting tightly. That is one of the things, as well as standing way back from your easel so that you're working with your whole arm. If you're interested in painting loose, I have a PDF on 7 tips to loosen up. I'll put the link below in the description so that you can sign up and receive that PDF. Referring back to the photograph a bit, trying to add a little bit more definition. And again, using that back of the brush handle. There's always some thinking time when you're painting as well. Here you see me adding a little bit of the yellow tone up into the sky. Again, this is going to help the painting relate. The sky will talk to the foreground. it's important to move your colors around in your work so they're just not in one place. Doing a little bit of shaping and putting in a little bit of a brighter color there. Adding some of that blue down into the foreground. And even some into the trees. I want to make a better differentiation between the sky there and the top of the mountain. So I'm adding some lighter color into it. And this is going to give it a lot more depth as well. So again, I'm trying to keep really loose while I do this. Adding a little bit of highlights. And again, I'm using the same brush throughout this painting. Trying to work with a bigger brush on a small surface is another way to keep yourself as loose as possible. Pick a brush that is larger than you think you need. Remember, if you get too much on, you can always change it. Just like I did there. So again, scratching a little bit of line back into my painting. And coming back into the clouds with that white. So it's not pure white. I've added a little bit of yellow to it to warm it up. Now back onto the top of the mountain, just giving a little bit of an edge there. So that's another thing to think about is your edges. If you want blurred edges, sharp edges, it's nice to have some variety of edge work in your paintings. As this is just a study, I don't want to, work on it for a long period of time. So I have limited myself to an hour to paint this, and I actually ended up doing it in a bit less than an hour, about 45 minutes. So this video is in real time. I've cut out some of the mixing and thinking parts of the video so that wouldn't totally bore you, but I hope that you appreciate watching it in real time opposed to speeding up. I think it gives you an idea of how fast I work, and I think it's just sometimes nice to not have everything in fast forward. But if you do want to do that, you can use the settings in YouTube to speed it up and watch it faster. I am using a tiny brush here, a fine liner. Sometimes I like to come in and make a few details this way and little lines. You need to have your paint quite thin. I like to use a high flow acrylic for this, or put quite a bit of water in my paint so it's very fluid. You could also use ink as well, and that way you can move it around quite easily. So I've switched now to my knitting needle to try and make some marks and lines here. If you enjoy marks and lines in your work, you might want to watch Louis Noble. He also loves marks and lines and is a master at the landscape in a very intuitive way. So you may want to check him out as well. So just coming in with a Stabilo All pencil, and this is water soluble, so it will smear unless I fix it. So I either use a spray fixative or I put gloss or matte medium on a paper towel and daub it on. And that is actually my preferred way of fixing something, especially a small area, so that I don't have to worry about taking my painting outside and using the aerosol spray. I prefer to keep my studio practice as safe as possible. So I've learned about this method somewhere along the line about putting some medium on a paper towel and dabbing it on your water-soluble medium, and it seems to work well. Just coming back in with that fine liner brush, putting a few little highlights where the sun may be catching on things, and it just gives a little sparkle to your painting. I find at this point you can start overworking a painting once you get a little brush in your hand and you start wanting to put in the details. So I think that it is time to call it a day on this one. And after I add this little highlight, a little bit of warm green in a couple of places. But really don't overdo it. You can lose the freshness of your painting if you overwork it. So I'm back to the big brush here and going back into the clouds to give them a little bit more life. And using your finger to blend is a very good tool. I find if you don't like using your finger, you can use a rag or a sponge. That will also work. I'm going to take off the tape now so that you can see what the painting would look like without the messy edge. I did get some bleed through, especially on the bottom. I guess I didn't press it down hard enough. There's the finished painting. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Also, keep an eye out. I will be recording the larger canvas as I paint it, and I will post it up here. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.